Sir, please start.
Okay. So good morning, friends. I believe I am audible to all. Uh, so we will start the first paper, foundation paper for foundation paper 4, fundamental of business economics and management. Let me quickly take you through the syllabus. I think slides are visible to all. Okay. So good morning, friends. I believe I am audible to all. So we will Okay, now the structure of this paper is like this. There are two subjects in this paper. First is business economics and the second one is fundamental of management. The weightage has been segregated for the both subjects as 70 and 30. 70 for business economics and 30 marks for management. In business economics, we will cover the basic concepts of economics, various forms of market, money and banking theory, and bit of business environment. Now the segregation of marks would be like this. Basic concepts would be 15 marks, the forms of market 20, money and banking 20, and 15 for business economics and environment. The fundamental of management, we will cover all the fundamental of management concepts. What is management, different level of management, extra, all those stuff, which will have a weightage of around 30 marks in your paper. So today we will start with the basic concepts of business economics. Wherever you think that you need to take the screenshot, you can take up the slides or put it on the note. So let's start. In this business economics, we will cover 5 major areas: basic concepts, business environment, theory of production, forms of market, money and banking. Today we will try to cover the first two, basic concepts of business economics and business environment. Okay, so let's start. Let's first understand what is this economics means. Though the science of economics had been prevailing in humankind till the existence of human being, but the formal studies of economics started after Adam Smith, who is also regarded as the father of economics. In our culture, Chanakya, Kautilya, these were the great people who credited, the study of economics for well-being of human being and the society. So what actually this word economics means? Say at this planet Earth, we have limited resource, whether it is land, whether it is water, whether it is coal, whether it is minerals, whatever we get from the nature is limited in nature. But all the human beings and their needs to fulfill their life, needs to fulfill their aspiration, all these are unlimited in nature. So economics typically is a process by which we meet both the ends, means the means of the people, the needs of the people by proper utilization of the available scarce resource. So at various time, people devise various strategy. How can we efficiently utilize the resources and meet all the needs of human being? All this process, all these techniques are dealt in the process of economics. From Adam Smith's till now, we have evolved the meaning of economics in different way. And typically, if you see, the economics has 4 different type of definitions. I have written down all the 4 definitions. Hope it is visible to you. Now, these definitions are typically named as wealth definition. All credit goes to Adam Smith and JB Say. The welfare definition, Alfred Marshall was credited with defining the economics by the welfare process. Robbins, scarcity definition, and growth definition by J.M. Keynes and Pius Hamilton. Now you need to know what are these 4 definitions of economics, and you also need to know who were the people, who are responsible for giving these definitions, like wealth definition, welfare definition, scarcity definition, growth definition. So if anyone asks you what is scarcity definition, you should not only able to write or tell them what is scarcity definition, but you should also able to understand that this definition was actually originated by Robbins. So let's start and dig the details of all this definition and given by the respective individuals. Let's start with wealth definition. JB Say defines economics as a study of science of wealth, right? And Adam Smith with his famous book, which he wrote in 1776 after just Industrial Revolution. Uh, the title of the book is An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of Wealth of Nature. It defines economics is the science which deals with the creation of wealth. Now, if you see both, whether it is J.B. Say or the Adam Smith, both the gentlemen were talking about economic as a science, and it is a process of creating money. It's a process of, capital creation. So that's why, as per JB Say and Adam Smith, economics is nothing but it's a process of creating wealth. So any process, that makes you more richer, that helps you to create more wealth, can be called as economics, as per JB Say and Adam Smith. Alfred Marshall in somewhere in mid 80s, he had of different opinion, which he stressed in his book titled as Principle of Economics. Stressed. mm, Economics, he stressed that economics is just not a process of creating wealth, but it is also a process that makes sure that all the human beings living in the society, they are happy, they are satisfied, and they are in well-being status. Therefore, he defines the process of economics as economics being a study of mankind in ordinary business life. So whatever business anyone is doing, whether it is the nation, country, or any private entity, the whole purpose of their economic activity, the production activity, should be that mankind, that human beings are comfortable, they are happy, and their well-being. So this gentleman brings the social welfare nature in the process of economics, which was not there in the Adam Smith's definition. Adam Smith was more stressing on creation of wealth. So whether the commodity or the goods or the utility of the resource that you are converting into products and services, whether they are meeting the needs of human being or not, was not of so significance. But what was more significance with Adam Smith, that they should be sellable in the market. The commodity must bring a lot of profits, a lot of margins, a lot of capital, and ultimately should lead to wealth creation from the producer end. So in a way, we can say that wealth definition, Adam Smith's work was more centric towards the producer, and welfare definition, it was more centric. The focus was consumers, not producers. Now, further, in scarcity definition, Robinson, with his publication in 1932, an essay on the nature and significance of economics, he brought a different dimension. What he said, that look, we have limited resources on planet, and if we use these resources, then there are possibilities that we may, waste a lot of resources. So, and if we use one resource for only one type of production, that resource may have the alternatives also. So this gentleman brought the one of the important dimension in economics, by meaning that we understand that it's a process of meeting, all human needs with effective utilization of scarce resources. This gentleman was credited with bringing the concept of scarcity. And what he means by scarcity, that we have limited resource. So the science by which we can utilize this limited resource in effective way, and so that we are not only able to meet one need of human beings, but we are able to meet various needs of human being. And typically, therefore, he defines economics as a science which studies human behavior between ends and scar means. That means how we are, using this scar means, which may have many alternative needs. Suppose you have a piece of land. Now this piece of land can be used for agriculture purpose. It can also be used for setting up a factory, or it can also be used for, building a house. So how effectively we are using this piece of land to meet most of our needs is actually the objective of economics as per Robbins. Wonderful. It is very broad definition as compared to either Alfred Marshall or Adam Smith. However, this definition also does not take in consideration of the future generation. And there comes the growth definition by J.M. Keynes and P.U. Samuelson. This definition is more dynamic in nature and it is more relevant in today's time. So today, if we are studying economics, we are more, exploring this science of, using different resources for meeting different needs from growth perspective. That means what? If you recollect, in 2015 or 16 odd, we signed the Paris Convention, which talks about Save Planet Earth. So this definition actually talks about not only meeting the current needs of current human beings, but it also speaks about that the same resources may have alternative use for the people who may join this planet in maybe 10 years after, 20 years after, 50 years after. So it has future consideration. And therefore, in his book, titled as An Introductory Analysis in 1948, this gentleman defines economics as the study of how men and society choose, with or without use of working, to employ the scarce productive means that would have alternative use to produce now and in future. Now you see, in his definition, uh, Samuelson not only talk about, the use of resources for meeting various needs in today's context, but it also speaks about that we also need to consider that these resources may have some future alternative use, where more product or more different type of commodity may be created, and in future generation the human beings may have the need of it. So it talks about the conservation of resources also, beside its effective and efficient utilization, right? So these are, friends, four important definition that you must know about economics: wealth definition, welfare definition, scarcity definition, and growth definition. Keywords in all this definition, beside the basic definition, you also should know the people behind all this definition. Like in wealth definition, you should remember J.B. Say and Adam Smith. You should remember his book, which was the basis of the wealth definition, an inquiry into the nature and causes of wealth of nation, and the year 1776. So these are the three important things that you should remember about wealth definition. Same goes with Alfred Marshall. You should remember the book, The Principle of Economics, and the year of publication, 1870. Robbins, you should remember his essay on the nature and significance of economics, and the year 1932. For Samuelson, you should remember 1948, an introductory analysis. And you should also remember that Samuelson is more credited with the futuristic economical process. That means conservation and growth part. OK, now let's understand what is the process of economics. Now, whenever any economical activity is done, the decision maker could be the producer at micro level and at macro level, a country for a sake, and more wider level. In today's term, we are talking about global, so global leaders. Now, economics as a subject matter, it deals with some central issue, and these central issues are called as central problem of economics. So what are these central problems of economics? They are typically three central problem of economics. You remember when I explained you at the beginning what is economics? It's a process of, meeting different needs by effective utilization of available scarce resource. So resources are very limited in nature and human needs are unlimited. The process by which we are able to meet all these unlimited needs of human being by effective utilization of limited resources is actually economics. So whenever we devise this process, how we are going to utilize this limited resources for meeting human needs, then we come up with three challenges. And these three challenges are called central problem of economics. Now, what are these challenges? Challenge number one, what to produce? Since the resources are very limited in nature, so taking a wrong call to decide a commodity or good to produce may, uh, may resist us to produce the alternatives of that resources. As I was giving you the example of piece of land, you have a piece of land. If you decide the entire piece of land you are going to utilize for construction of your house, the same piece of land would have been used for different other purpose also, like for setting up a factory, making a road, making a hospital, and what for. So it is a challenge for us to take a call from this piece of land, whether I use this piece of land for the purpose of construction of house, or should I go for a road? Should I go for hospital? This is a typical challenge which is always faced whenever we decide of production. So what to produce is very typical, and before starting the economical activity, this challenge has to be addressed. Now, how to produce? What technique has to be devised? What process we should be adopting for the production? How many labors, how much capital is required. The entire purpose of how to produce is to make sure that we are not wasting up any resources and we are able to, meet most of the needs, all needs, if not possible to meet of human being. So at least we are able to give a variety of basket full of products to the mankind. Therefore, this challenge is also an important challenge and need to be addressed before starting any economical activity. And the last challenge is for whom to produce. We as a producer, we as a decision maker, we as an economist, we may have taken a call that let's utilize this resource for creating, suppose, good X. So let us decide that all the steels, all the minerals which are available in the beneath the earth, let's utilize all the steel for the production of vehicles. But we need to understand whether these vehicles are the need of human being living at particular geography at a given point of time or not. So it is also important to address the third challenge, that the production that we are doing, the goods and services that we are producing, is it relevant and does it meet the need of the human being? So we have to consider the solution of all three challenges: what to produce and how to produce and for whom to produce, before actually engaging ourselves in the activity of economics, right? Now, friends, these are some basic understanding of economics, the meaning part, the explanation part, various definitions, right, and the challenges. Since centuries, there had been a debate if it's a process, then whether this subject is a subject of art or it's a subject of science. Now, this debate remains very controversial, and there are a lot of arguments in favor of economics being science or economics being arts. But I consider this subject a wonderful dynamic subject that indeed works on the principles of established theory. It indeed works with lot of analysis. It indeed works with logic. It indeed works with lot of projection. But it is also the ability of the economist, the beauty of the economist, the art of the economist, by which the economist is able to address all these three central problems: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. Therefore, it is a bridge, it is basically, the economics is a bridge between science and art. It's a wonderful subject that remains science with an acumen of arts for all those people who want to get engaged in this process, economics. The detail about the criticism and the favor regarding economics being science and arts is very well written in your manual. You just go through it. It is self-explanatory and very detailed criticism, as well as the favor has been well documented in your manual. It doesn't need much of explanation from my side. So till now, you should be clear about what is the meaning of economics, what we understand economics, what are various definition and the timeline and the people who credited all these definitions, some publications of all those gentlemen, and the challenges of or the central problems of economics. Now let's explore some of the basic concepts which are very important for all of us before we go through the various subject matters of economics. So I'll come to the subject matter of economics later on. First, you should understand the various important key terms and key theories in the process of economics. So let's start with some of the terminology. Please understand this terminology very well. If required, you can take a snapshot of the slides, starting from the first word, which is frequently used in economics: goods and services. Now I consider both commodities and services as one term, goods. So what is this goods? Goods means the actual physical product that we produce by utilizing the resource, and services means all those intangible work, intangible commodities which are physically not there but is instrumental to make human being well-being. So goods and commodities are actually commodities and services are actually the goods which meets all human needs. Now here word of caution. When we say goods in layman's term, that means all the products, all the services that a human being needs. But in economics, only those commodities and services may be called as goods which is backed by purchasing power. For example, suppose I dream of, reaching to the moon. So I have a service requirement that someone should take me to the moon, but I do not have enough of capital. Now this goods cannot be a goods for me, right? It may be a goods for somebody else, but for me, it is not a goods. Why? Because it does not have any purchasing backup. Similarly, suppose a producer thinks that now let me make all the human beings happy. Now how this gentleman will make the human beings happy? Does happiness have any purchasing power? No, it doesn't have. There are many various dimensions which are involved for making a human being happy. So only those commodities and services which can be exchanged in the market or which have a purchasing power can be called as goods in economics. Now let's move to the second important concept, which is very important for understanding economics: utility. Now what we understand by word utility? Utility in economics means the rate of satisfaction of consuming a good. So it's the degree of satisfaction of consuming a good, the amount of happiness, amount of conviction, amount of satisfaction that we get by consuming a good. Uh, is can be measured in as utility. So it is the capacity of satisfying a goods or services to a consumer. And as it is written on the slide, you can very well see it. The degree of satisfaction of consuming a good is what is called as utility. Now utility has there are some other concepts associated with utility. The first one is marginal utility. Let's understand what is the marginal utility. At every time when we add consuming incremental unit of any commodity, what is the additional degree of utility that we are getting can be called as marginal utility. For example, suppose you are eating an ice cream and you are satisfied to point X. Now, after finishing off your first ice cream, if you uh, start eating another ice cream, then you may be getting some extra satisfaction. Some extra desire might have been fulfilled. So what is this extra desire? The additional rate of satisfaction that you got because of consuming one more unit of ice cream is what is called marginal utility of ice cream. And now let's talk about total utility. Total utility means sum total of all degree of utility of consuming the total goods. So in our previous example, we consumed first ice cream, we got, satisfaction. Maybe if I convert it on the numerical value, let it be 5. Then we consume the second unit of ice cream. So our degree of satisfaction increased by 2 units. So 5 became 7. So when you sum total the utility of both the units, first ice cream and second ice cream, the total utility on mathematical on numerical value comes around 7. So 7 becomes the total utility. Now these are the 4 important terminology: goods, utility, marginal utility, total utility. You should remember. There are other terms also that should be understood very, very well, like what is cost, what is wealth, what is income, what is welfare. All this thing we will deal as and when we move through the distribution part or the production theory. For time being, let's focus on this 4 important terms so that it will help us to understand the subsequent concepts. So Alfred Marshall, as I was talking about the welfare definition, so this gentleman had found a unique correlation between the consumption of a commodity and the rate of satisfaction, which he explained us in the form of law of diminishing marginal utility. We will term it as DMU. So D stands for diminishing, M stands for marginal, and U stands for utility. Now, the relationship between the rate of satisfaction of a good and the quantity of good as explained by Alfred Marshall is what as we keep on increasing the consumption of goods. So as we keep on increasing the quantity of consumption of goods, the degree of satisfaction declines. So whenever you add, a unit more in consuming X commodity, always its marginal utility will decline. You can see this in a graph. The picture is there on the screen. On x-axis, the quantity of goods is mentioned, and on y-axis, it's the utility part. Let's see with our previous example. Now at point number 1, when you have consumed, say, first ice cream, your rate of satisfaction was 40. Now when you increase the unit, so after eating a first ice cream, when you take another ice cream, the utility margin incremental utility, the MU, that declines. So when you consume the first ice cream, your utility, your marginal utility was 40, but the moment you added another unit of consumption of ice cream, see from 1 to your marginal utility declined to somewhere at 20. uh, from from this 0 to 40 at 1, and from at point number 2 you say it is from 0 to 20, and as you keep on increasing the number of units, the marginal utility keeps on declining. Now this slope of declining marginal utility on increasing the consumption of uh, goods is actually called as diminishing marginal utility. It has 3 relevance. Now on the upper curve, you will see there is a total utility curve also, which is moving from left to right. See at quantity 1, the total utility is 40. At quantity 2, the total utility becomes, somewhere 60. So the total utility has increased, though marginal utility has declined. Why it had happened? Because after consuming the first ice cream, you already had some marginal utility 40. Though after consuming second unit of ice cream, your marginal utility was 20 only, but the sum total of 20 and 40, it becomes 60. So total utility is increasing. So initially, as per law of diminishing marginal utility, initially total utility keeps on increasing. So as we keep on increasing the quantity of goods, the total utility of the goods keep on increasing. Then at quantity 5, you see it remains somewhat constant. So at some quantity level, the marginal utility becomes absolutely constant. And thereafter, when marginal utility goes negative, the total utility starts declining. So it explains us 3 typical nature of consumer behavior. Number 1, you can, as you increase the consumption of any goods, your total utility increases, though marginal utility decreases. The total utility keeps on increasing to that quantity where your marginal utility is 0. So slope number 2. And thereafter, even if you increase further consumption of goods, you are not going to be benefited. Rather, the marginal utility becomes a negative, and hence the total utility starts declining. So for producers perspective, it gives us a direction that up to what quantity, up to what quantity we should take a production decision, to what extent we should keep lowering down the price or increasing the price, because after certain quantity of supply in the market, the consumer is not going to purchase it. And what is that quantity? It is the quantity where the marginal utility is 0. So at the first point, when marginal utility though is declining but has not reached to 0, there is still scope that demand may increase in the market. But once this marginal utility becomes 0, this is the quantity where further escalation in demand may not happen. Right. And when marginal utility becomes negative, then the consumer are fed up. They don't require any further quantity of goods. So this is the time where production activity has to be stopped and the supply has to be restricted. One of the important law which acts as basis for lot of important economical decisions. It helps us to fix up the pricing of commodity. It help us to set up the supply quantity. It help us to understand the demand in totality. It help us to understand both the consumer behavior and the producer behavior. Therefore, you should never forget this law of diminishing marginal utility. Uh, One of the core principle for all economical decisions. Now this DMU or law of diminishing marginal utility, whenever stated by Alfred Marshall, he considers certain things to be constant. So these are the assumptions. He made an assumptions that all goods are of homogeneous size and homogeneous unit. Suppose we are in a construction unit, so he considered that all residential apartments are of 2 BHK only. There cannot be any apartment of 3 BHK or 5 BHK, right? So there is a homogeneous size and the units are fixed. That means the total number of apartments are fixed in a given market. Now, this is just assumption, but in reality it doesn't happen. You also tend to, get more resources. You also tend to explore the resources which actually today not present or not visible, but later on in future you may able to identify this. So that time the size and units of commodity it increases. Not only the homogeneity in unit and size, but he also considered the total number of consumers to be set. Suppose in a market there only the population is only of 1 lakh, then we can very well explain the DMU, its declining total marginal utility curve and the three different stages of total utility. But if the population increases, then the marginal utility will also increase, right? Because the new consumers have been added. So that time this downward slope does not happen, right? So this is something which he considered as constant. That's why we call it as assumptions of law of diminishing marginal utility. What are the other consumptions? Time is constant. That means he considered that all the consumptions is happening in a given periodic interval only. So maybe 1 day, 1 week or 1 month. So entire activity is happening in the set time period only. For example, if you consume one ice cream and immediately, instantly you go for the second one, for sure your marginal utility will decline. But if you consume the second ice cream not on that day, that moment, maybe after 4 hours, maybe after next hour, then there is all possibility that you may get better rate of satisfaction or more rate of satisfaction. So in this case, the marginal utility is not declining, rather it is increasing. Why? Because in law of diminishing marginal utility, the second assumption which Alford considered was the constant time. So time is not constant always for all type of goods and services. It may differ from time to time. It may vary from consumer to consumer. And the last assumption which was made by Alfred Marshall while explaining law of diminishing marginal utility, that all consumers have same taste and preference lifelong. Suppose you develop you don't have a you don't like eating up ice cream, but you are part of the market. But after a week, you develop a taste and preference for eating ice cream. Then you add up to the total consumer. Earlier, there were total consumers only 2. Now you were also added. So the diminishing marginal utility will also not apply to this market because the taste and preference of consumer has changed. Now there are some exceptions also. That means the consumption of certain goods and services which do not follow or which do not give us the relationship between the rate of satisfaction, utility, and its quantity of consumption. Now, what are these goods and services? Maybe collection. Suppose you are consuming the good for just purpose of collecting it, like coins, like stamps. Now, in this case, as you keep on adding new collections, today you have the currency of suppose 10 countries. As you get the new currency of 11th country, your utility actually increases, does not declines. But what DMU suggests us, as we increase, the consumption of goods and services, its marginal utility is going to decline. But in this case, it is not happening. Why? Because it's an exception. It is not a routine good. It is not an essential good. In this case, you are collecting coins or stamps. So as you get new one, your rate of satisfaction increases rather than declining. So these are some conditions. Exceptions means limitations, some condition where DMU does not follow. Same goes for hobbies and for misers. Now, if I'm miser enough to add a lot of money, or to have many cars, I have a hobby of keeping bikes. Now, in this case, what will happen, in spite of me having 4 bikes, when I'm going to purchase the 5th one, my rate of satisfaction will increase rather than declining. Why? It is not something which I'm purchasing for meeting my needs. Rather, it is something which I'm purchasing. I'm trying to have just to satisfy my hobbies. And the third one, for capital like money and gold. Nowadays, cryptocurrency, very soon, after a couple of years, you will find that most of the currencies in Western world will be pledged against cryptocurrency. So now you can add even cryptocurrency. Now these are some articles where the law of diminishing marginal utility never decline applies. Why? Everyone wants to be more wealthy. Money is the only mean which help us to make sure that we are able to channelize rest all resources. So the importance of money never, declines. It is instrumental. It is more of a medium rather than a commodity, rather than a goods. Same holds true with gold. So now these are some articles. Now you can add up even cryptocurrency. Now these are some of the articles which help us to understand that law of diminishing marginal utility do have some limitations, some exceptions on in certain situations. Importance, I think I have already explained you. It is law of diminishing marginal utility. This theory, it is one of the major tool for demand for forecasting. It helps us to understand the real value or the maximum value of any commodity, the price that we set up. That's what is called value of paradox. It is the law on the basis of which all demand and supply related decisions are always taken. It also helps us for the purpose of distribution of wealth back at micro level or macro level. And it helps for the statutory body, for the regulatory body, for taking up taxation related decisions. Right. So you should always remember this law of diminishing marginal utility, the typical curve, the relationship between marginal utility and total utility, the various 3 stages of total utility curve and its significance. Initially, it increases. That means the demand in the market is going to increase. Later on, when marginal utility comes to 0, this is the time where further there will be no increase in the demand. So as I was telling you in the subsequent slide that DMU is the tool for demand forecasting. See, by this curve, we can forecast demand, that what would be the maximum demand. So 5 in this case, as per this curve, the maximum demand for good X would be 5 in any case, because after 5, the backed by the purchasing power. So you cannot consider that how all the goods which are needed by consumer or human being as demand. Only those quantity can be considered by uh, economists as a demand, for which the consumer surplus. They have the power of buying it. Suppose I want to have 5 houses, but I have a purchasing power of buying only 2 houses. So I may have a need of 5 houses, but my demand is not 5, it is only 2. Why? Because I have a purchasing power of having only 2 houses. So demand, it cannot be considered as the quantity of all the desire, rather it is the quantity of desires which can be backed by purchasing power. Now, what are the factors which determines demand? There are 6 important factors listed in the slide. These are important factors which we should understand. The first factor is price factor. In this case, I am talking of price of the good. Now we may have demand, we may have need of buying a goods or services, but we do not have sufficient. The price of that goods and services is so high that we are cautious about taking this call, that why to utilize this money for meeting this demand. Let's use this money for meeting some other demand or maybe of some other good, right? So price of both the original product and the price of relative goods. Now here new term comes, relative goods. People, you need to understand relative goods are of two type. One is substitutes and the another is complementary goods. So what is substitutes? When one good can satisfy the need of some other good. Now both these goods may be called as substitute goods. For example, tea and coffee, both are beverages. If I drink tea and someday I don't get tea but I get coffee, still my need of beverages met. So these two can be called as substitutes. Another example, bicycle, car, both are for commutation purpose, right? So they can be called as substitute of each other. Uh, Pen and pencil. You can write with pen also, you can write with pencil also. So both these goods are substitute goods. Now let's see what is complementary goods. Complementary goods means two or more goods which are consumed for meeting same need. Now you cannot drive your motorcycle without fuel. So fuel becomes complementary goods to motorcycle. You cannot write with pen on a notepad without the pen having the refill or the ink. So ink becomes complementary goods for the pen. So determinants of demand is not only the price of commodity, it also is the price of relative commodity. Now this relative commodity price of either complementary or substitute goods also are determinant or important factor in deciding the demand at any given point of time. Come to the third determinant. Third factor is income. Income of the consumer itself. So every commodity can only be demanded when it is backed by purchasing power, as the definition of demand suggests. So if consumer do not have income, if the consumer do not have the consumer surplus, if they do not have money in their pocket, can they really purchase those goods? And if they cannot purchase those goods, they do not have the ability of purchasing those goods, the quantity which they aspire to purchase cannot be called as demand. As demand suggests us, it's the quantity which is backed by purchasing power. So income is very important for deciding the purchasing power of consumer. The next factor would be taste and preference. Another important factor. If the consumer do not have taste and preference, though the producer is producing the goods, but it is really not the demand of the market. Suppose you go in North India. Now most of the people, they eat chapatis there. More of chapatis, rotis rather than rice. And in East or in South, the consumer they prefer eating rice more. So now in North, if you go up and you set up production activity of a restaurant that serves only rice related products, perhaps you may not have demand because the consumer there do not have much of the taste and preference for rice and rice related product. So taste and preference is also important factor of deciding demand, how much quantity of goods and services may be demanded at any given point of time. The population, what is the size of consumers? Now if population is less, demand would be less. If population increases, demand will also increase. And the weather condition or the climate condition. Now these are some of the important factors of demand. Now let's understand law of demand. Again, the credit goes to Alfred Marshall. This gentleman was responsible for most of the economical theories. So you will frequently keep on hearing about Alfred Marshall again and again. As per Alfred Marshall, as the price of any commodity increases, its quantity, its demand will keep on declining. and as the price of commodity decreases, its demand will keep on increasing. So law of demand actually explains the functional relationship between the price of commodity and its quantity of demand. So it's a valid law. It's a wonderful law that explains us at various prices what quantity of goods may be demanded in the market. One of the primary theory of understanding both the consumer behavior and of course for taking the production related decision. Now, if you see in this picture, I have I have displayed a curve. On y-axis, the price of commodity is written, and on x-axis, the quantity of various goods are written. Now, what is this picture is all about? This picture explains us law of demand. As we keep on decreasing the price from 5 to 4, see the quantity of demand has increased from 10 to 20. Further, if the price has been scaled down to 3, the quantity of demand has further increased to 30 and so on. So the slope is the curve is sloping downwards from top to bottom. At high price, the quantity of demand is less. At low price, at price 1, the quantity of demand is extremely high, 50. So law of demand explains us as the price of commodity, it speaks about that price and quantity of demand share inverse relationship among themselves. That means if price increases, the quantity will decline, and if price decreases, the quantity of demand will increase. Okay, uh, let's understand what are the factors responsible for this, the nature of the curve sloping downwards. Now, factors are the first and the most important factor, price, price of commodity, the second, income of the population, and the third, taste and preference of the consumer. Okay. Now there are two type of demands, individual demand and market demand. Now this is typically an individual demand curve. This is for one consumer. If we add up all the individual demands of a particular geography of a particular market and we take sum total of it, then that becomes total market demand. So while determining the demand, we need to understand both individual demand schedule and uh, total market demand schedule. Total market demand schedule means forecasting the demand curve of uh, all the consumers in the market and having a sum total of it. And individual means individual one consumer what demand they would have at different price level. Now, why this law of demand, falls when the price is declining? It's it it is because of some of the factor. What are these factors? These are factors are listed here. The causes of falling demand, uh, law of diminishing marginal utility, substitute effect, income effect, and the buyer's population. But there are certain cases where this law of demand does not apply. That means even at higher price, the buyer tend to purchase more quantity. Now, what are these situations? These are called limitations or exceptions. So the first one is Giffen paradox. What does this mean? This means for essential commodities, roti, kapda, makan, those goods which are very important for living purpose. Now for this essential commodities, बिना खाना खाए तो कोई consumer रह नहीं सकता ना. So in this case, even if you increase the price, the quantity demand will never decline. It will either remain static or it will increase. So this is what is called Giffen paradox, that some commodities do not follow the law of demand. Speculation and conspicuous means the goods and services that we purchase only for the purpose of speculating it, that it is coming from X brand, Y brand, it may have, very good quality, though it may not be always true. Conspiraciness just to prove, in the crowd that we are having a status. For example, you purchase a Mercedes instead of Toyota. So what is this Mercedes? It gives you a status symbol. You purchase a iPhone instead of any other brand's phone. So the job is effectively done by other effective brands also, but it gives you a different status satisfaction in the society when you are using an iPhone. So such goods again do not follow the law of demand. In this case, in this, even the price is increased, the demand never gets uh, demand is never reduced, rather it is either constant or it increases. Then share market or speculative business. Now you see typically when there is more of share trading happening, the value of the face value of those share increases. So again, these are the situation where the law of demand do not follow. Bandwagon effect and Veblen effect. So let's understand what are these. Veblen effect means when consumer buys a product, think high price product, thinking that since the price is high, so the quality will also be high, which may not be true. So for certain consumers, this law of demand do not prevails. ज्यादा प्राइस कर है इसका मतलब क्वालिटी अच्छा हो सकता है प्राइस का क्वालिटी से कोई लेना देना ना हो फिर भी कंज्यूमर कई बार खरीदते हैं. So this false idea is called Veblen effect. And what is bandwagon effect? When people in society, they have a different set of, they try to project them in different, different groups or in a allied term, then the price does not matter. For example, you are living in a residence area and you purchase a club membership of some premium club. Now, actually, even if they are increasing the membership price, you still would like to join it. So there also this law of demand do not prevail. Now, with this, I think I have explained you law of demand, the factors of demand, the different type of demand schedule, market demand schedule and individual demand schedule, the causes why the demand curve fall after increasing the price and some limitations. Let's now understand the types of demand. So typically there are three types of demand: price demands, income demand, and cross demand. Let's understand each of this demand one by one. By price demand, what we mean, the relationship of quantity of demand with respect to its price is what is called price demand. So if the price increases, the quantity of demand is increasing. Now this relationship is called as price demand. Let's understand income demand. What is income demand? Income demand means the relationship of demand with respect to income. So in case of income, what happens if in case of price, what happens is if the price of a goods is increasing, its demand is declining. But in case of income demand, what happens if the price or if the income of consumer increases, its demand also increases irrespective of any consideration to the price. So at the same price, if the income of consumer will increase, its demand will increase. Even if you increase the price, there will be no decline in demand. And the third demand is cross demand. That means the relationship between the demand of product one with respect to change happening with the price of its relative goods. Now I have already explained you relative goods are of two types: substitutes and complementary goods. So for example, if the price of tea increases, the demand of coffee increases. Now this is what is called cross demand. If the price of petrol increases, the demand for motorcycle decreases. Though the price of motorcycle has actually gone down, but the price of complementary good has increased. So relationship between the demand of commodity X with its price of its relative goods is what is called cross demand. Now, how this change happens in the demand curve? There are two type of change. When the quantity is changed on the slope, that means from price 5 to price 4 to price 3 in this curve to price 1, the various different quantities of demand, then we call it as change in demand. And when the entire curve shifts either leftwards or the rightwards, then it is called as shift in demand. Now, why there is a shift in demand? There is always shift in demand because of shift in any of the factor. Suppose at same price level, the demand is X unit. but the income of population has increased. So the entire demand will shift rightwards. So at same price, instead of demand of X, the demand will become X plus 10 or X plus 1, right? So when the entire demand is shifting rightwards and leftwards, we need to understand that it is not because of the price factor, rather it is because of some other determinant of the factor. Now this determinant, as you know, can be either income or taste and preference. And if the demand is changing only because of price, then the change in demand can be studied on the slope. The demand will keep on coming down and increasing up on the slope only. But if there is a change in other factor like income and taste and preference, then entire curve, the entire demand schedule will shift either rightwards or leftwards. Okay. So I think with this, we try to understand very quickly the demand theory. What is law of demand? What is demand? What are determinants of demand? What are various factors of demand? Uh, the types of demand, market schedule, demand schedule, individual demand schedule, change in demand and change in and demand shift. Let's understand now supply theory. First, definition of supply. Supply means quantity of goods producer is willing to sell at given price at any given time. Again, we need to understand two important things. It is not all the quantity of goods which producer is willing to sell. Rather, it is the quantity of goods that producer is willing to sell at a given price. So if the price increases, definitely the producer will love to sell more quantity. And if the price is reduced, there is an impact on the margin. The producer may think of, uh, supplying less of the quantity. So supply has to be understood as the quantity of goods producer is willing to give in the market. Is producer is willing to sell, but at any given price in a given market. Now, again, thanks to Alfred Marshall, he has also explained the supply theory with the help of law of supply. Now, if you see in this slide, there is a picture showing a curve, showing a slope where different quantities of supply is on x-axis and its corresponding price is there on the y-axis. The relationship, what is law of supply? It is the functional relationship between the price of commodity and its quantity which can be supplied in the market. Now, if you see, unlike in law of demand, in law of supply, there is a direct relationship between price and supply. In demand, what was there? It was indirect relationship. So if price is increasing, the demand is decreasing. If price is decreasing, the demand is increasing. But in law of supply, it is both this price and quantity of supply shares direct relationship. That means if the price is increasing, the supply is also increasing for obvious reason. Producer is producing any commodity. Now you recollect the wealth definition given by Adam Smith. It is a process of creating wealth. So producer will be happy to sell more if the margin is more. So at a higher price, there are more income. There are more profit. So producer naturally would love to have more profit rather than less profit. As and when price of commodity increases, its supply also increases. And the second factor is the moment price increases, the demand of that good respective good will decline. So there is already more surplus of goods and services available in the market. Many consumers would not like to buy it because they lack the in the market. So this typical relationship, the direct relationship between the price of commodity and its supply is called as law of supply. There are factors of supply also, unlike that of demand. Now, what are these factors? Price of commodity. The first factor, as price increases, the supply increases. The second factor, price of input. Now, at times, what happens, if the price of raw material increases or decreases, it may also impact this curve. Then The third factor would be the technique or the technology, weather condition under which production is happening, and the government policy. Sometimes government imposes more taxes, more. Sometimes government announces more subsidy. So at that time you will find this law of supply do not prevail. So price of input increased. So though the price of commodity has increased, but the cost expenditure has also increased. So producer is not ready to supply more. Ideally, what producer should do, it should increase the supply because the price of commodity has increased. But the fact is, the raw materials price has also increased and it has hurt the margin of the producer. So producer is not ready to supply more. Same thing happens with the technique, whether government policy. Now, unlike we try to understand the individual demand schedule and total market demand schedule. In similar way, we should also understand the individual supply schedule and total market supply schedule. So what is individual market supply schedule? It speaks about the uh, available typical readability of a producer to sell its commodity, its goods at different prices at any given point of time. Now, when we try to understand this supply schedule of goods at different prices of one producer, so at price 5, suppose the producer is ready to sell 10 units at price 10, the producer is ready to sell 20 units at price 30, the producer is ready to sell 40 units. This is individual supply schedule. But at any given point of time, when we sum total the all individual supply schedules of all producers put together, then it becomes the total market supply schedule. Suppose there is only one producer in the market, then both the market supply schedule and individual supply schedule will remain constant. But if there are more producers, you will find that market supply schedule is different and individual supply schedule is different. Either being supplied more or less depending upon the increase in the price in the market. Okay. But if there is change in any of other factor like price of input, technique or government policy, then the entire slope shifts either leftward or downward. So even the price is increasing, the supply is not increasing, and the entire supply schedule of that individual or that market either goes up or it comes down. Now this is what is when the entire slope is shifting rightward or downward, it is called supply shift, which gives us a understanding that this is not happening because of change in price, rather it is happening because of change in price of input, or there is some new government policy which has been imposed on the producer, or there is technological change which is actually changing the entire supply schedule. So when entire supply schedule changes, it is supply shift, and when just supply changes but it remains on the supply schedule, then it is change in supply. So with this, I think I have covered both demand theory and supply theory. We try to understand law of demand, law of supply. We also try to understand the other concept like law of diminishing marginal utility. Now let's move to the stage of equilibrium. Now what is this equilibrium? Equilibrium is the quantity and the price at which demand and supply of commodity meets with each other. So very important, which tells us the economies of scale. That means what is the maximum quantity that can be consumed, that can be supplied, or can be demanded. So this is the price. The most relevant. It also helps us to understand the price mechanism of any goods and services. As you can see in this picture, there is a supply curve and there is a demand curve. At point E, both supply curve and demand curve are intersecting each other, and this is happening at quantity Q and quantity P. So P is the reasonable or the equilibrium price of this commodity, and Q is the equilibrium quantity of this commodity. Let's try to understand one more theory, the concept of elasticity. Now I'm explaining you elasticity from both perspectives, demand elasticity and supply elasticity. That's why I'm calling it as elasticity, not demand elasticity. So let's understand the degree of change in demand or supply of any goods with respect to demand and supply of any of the factors of demand and supply is what is called elasticity. In case of it is of two types, elasticity of demand and elasticity of supply. Let's understand each one by one. In case of demand elasticity, if we are changing the price of a commodity, what would be the change of the quantity demanded, right? And if we are changing any other factor of determinant of demand like income of consumer, if the income is increased, what will be the change in the demand? Now this relationship, the change happening because of any of the determinant factor has actually shifted either upward or downward. Now this elasticity of demand help us to understand the proportionate relationship between change in demand and change in factors. This factor is either price or income or relative goods. Therefore, the demands are also of three types. Elasticity are of three types. Elasticity, price elasticity of demand, when the rate of change of demand is happening due to rate of change in price, we call it as elasticity of price elasticity of demand. Cross elasticity of demand, when we try to understand the relationship between the rate of change of demand and with respect to rate of change of price of any of the relative goods, we call it as cross elasticity of demand. And income elasticity of demand, when we try to understand the relationship between the rate of change of demand with respect to rate of change of income of the consumer, we call it as income elasticity of demand. Similarly, elasticity of supply is also of three types: price elasticity of supply, cross elasticity of supply, and income elasticity of supply. So what is this? Price elasticity of supply means relationship between the change of quantity supplied with respect to change of its price is what is called price elasticity of supply. The rate of change of quantity supplied with respect to rate of change in relative goods price is what is called cross elasticity of supply, and rate of change of supply with respect to rate of change of income is what is called income elasticity of supply. So elasticity, it is the functional relationship between the rate of change in demand with respect to rate of change in any of the factor. Now this factor could be price, this factor could be the relative goods price, or this factor could be income. Similarly, what is elasticity of supply? It is the relationship between the degree of change in supply with respect to determinants of supply. Now, what could be the determinants? It could be price, it could be the price of relative goods, or the income part, right? Now, classification, elasticity on the basis of factor, I have explained to you, are of three types: price elasticity, income elasticity, cross elasticity. What is price elasticity? The functional relationship between the degree of change in demand with respect to degree of change in price. What is income elasticity? The relationship between the degree of change in demand or supply with respect to degree of change in income of the population. What is cross elasticity? The rate of change of demand with respect to rate of change in the price of relative goods. So on basis of factors, you can have three types of elasticity called as price elasticity, income elasticity, or cross elasticity. Similarly, on the basis of measurement, we can measure elasticity in 5 different types. So there are 5 different elasticity, and these are this speaks about the 5 different relationship that elasticity has with respect to price and demand or any of the factor. The first one is unitary elasticity. Means what? Unitary elasticity means that rate of change in demand or supply is equal to rate of change in any of the factor. Suppose there is a change in price with 10% of a commodity and changes demand is also happening in 10%, then the relationship uh, of both is constant. So the rate of change happening in demand is equal to rate in change happening in any of the factor. We call it as unitary elasticity. Perfect elasticity. Perfect elasticity means when the rate of change in demand or supply is infinity with respect to rate of change in price. Okay, by price, I don't mean only price. It may be other determinants also like income and relative goods. So just for explanation, I'm considering it to be price only. Now, what is relative elastic elasticity? It means when rate of change of demand is more than the rate of change in price. So here the elasticity numerical value will come more greater than 1. What is perfect inelastic elasticity? Perfect inelastic elasticity means there is no change in demand irrespective of change happening in the price. So the situation where you find absolutely no change, price बढ़ा है या घटा है, but there is no change in demand, then it is perfect inelasticity. Inelastic elasticity. What is relative inelastic elasticity? Change is happening, but it is not happening, the way it should happen. So inelastic elasticity means when the rate of change in demand is less than the rate of change in price. Okay. So let's see. If the rate of change in demand is equal to rate of change in price, it is unitary condition. If the rate of change of demand is less than the rate of change in price, then it is inelastic condition. And if the rate of change of demand is more than rate of change in price, then it is elastic condition. In elastic and elastic, we have further two categories. In perfect elasticity, the rate of change is not defined. It is infinity, can go to any extent. In relative elastic, it is more. The rate is more. Similarly, in perfect inelasticity, there is absolutely no change. It remains constant. And in relative inelastic elasticity, there is change, but this rate of change is less than the rate of change in any of the factor. Okay, so for measuring this elasticity for both demand and supply, after measurement, we can determine whether the elasticity is unitary in nature, it is inelastic in nature, it is elastic in nature. If it is elastic in nature, is it perfect elastic or it is somewhat elastic? If it is inelastic in nature, whether it is perfect inelastic or somewhat inelastic. And this we can understand by determining the rate of change. If it is elasticity is 1, we can conclude that elasticity is unitary in nature. If elasticity is greater than 1, but well defined, then we can conclude it is relative elastic in nature. If the elasticity cannot be defined infinity, then it can go to any extent. So it is perfect elastic condition. If the E is 0, that means there is no change happening. It is perfect inelastic condition. And if elasticity, the value that we get is less than 1, then it is somewhat inelastic, not perfect elastic, but not unitary. Okay, so how we measure this elasticity? There are various methods of measurement of elasticity. Typically, in business economics, we apply either of the 4 methods. The first one is percentage method. The second one is total outlay method. Both for the purpose of measuring elasticity of demand and supply, we can apply any of the 4 method. The first one is percentage method. The second one is total outlay method. The third one is point method. And the fourth one is arc method. So let's understand each of the method one by one. By percentage method, what we do, we take the percentage change in demand and we divide it by the percentage change in its price. Okay, and whatever number comes, we check it whether it is 1, it is undefined, it is less than 1, it is 0, or it is uh, greater than 1. And according to the result, we conclude whether it is unitary elasticity, or it is perfect elastic elasticity, or it is inelastic elasticity. So simple arithmetic we do. We first take out the percentage of change in demand, and then we divide it with the percentage change in price. Whatever number comes, it tells us whether the elasticity is unitary, elastic, or inelastic. Now in second method, total outlay method, it is we calculate the total expenditure done by the consumer. So suppose you are consuming X amount for purchasing 5 units, and you for purchasing 6 units, you end up, consuming X plus 1 amount, or the amount remains same, X. So in this case, uh, we just go through the total expenditure schedule of the consumer, and based upon total expenditure schedule, we see whether the elasticity is unitary elastic, or it is elastic, or it is inelastic elasticity. Now in outlay method, what we try to understand, you can refer unit 1 of your manual also. On page number 31, the total description is given. If the total expenditure of the consumer, it increases with falling of the price, then we call it as elastic elasticity. When the total expenditure, there is no change, the total expenditure remains same, uh, with respect to increase in price, then we call it as unitary elasticity. And if the total expenditure falls down, then we call it as inelastic elasticity. Now what is point method? In point method, we measure the segments. So, and whatever numerical value we get, uh, we identify whether it is unitary elastic, it is perfect elastic, or it is relative elastic, or it is perfect inelastic. Okay, so in this case, what we do, we divide the lower segment with the upper segment value. This is the lower segment around 10. This is the upper segment around 10. So we divide 10 oblique 10. Okay, then it comes 1 unitary elastic. Okay, and the last one is arc method. So these are the different methods by which you measure elasticity, and the same method is also applied for measuring the elasticity of supply. So I think we have covered important basic concepts of business economics. We have covered the meaning of economics. We try to understand the various definition. We try to understand the demand theory part. We also try to understand the supply theory part, the utility. Right now, the last thing in unit 1 comes the subject matter of economics. So there are broadly 4 important subject matters that in economics we try to study: the production, the market, the exchange, and the distribution. So we will cover all this 4 different subject matters: production theory, forms of market, money exchange, uh, uh, bankings, and wealth and income. All this we will try to go through in the subsequent classes. There are some other factors also which economists would love to study at various points for meeting the unlimited needs of human being with the limited scarce resource. Now these factors are techniques by which production is done, the value paradox, the price mechanism. Okay, now these are the subject matters of economics. So in business economics, actually we are dealing with all these important subject matters of economics. With this, I think the first unit of your syllabus, which carries roughly 15% of the weightage we have covered. The slides are with you. You can take snapshot of all the slides, which will give you quick points to go through, and will also recollect you all our discussion, everything that I have explained you today. And further, you can explore the study notes which has been provided to you by the institute. I think you would able to cover the unit 1 comfortably without any problem, without any doubt. Okay, now let's cover today another unit, because we have only 2 classes for economics and 2 for management. So let's cover another unit, that is economics and business environment. So what is business environment? Business environment are all the factors that influences or controls the business activities happening. Typically, there are 2 type of environments that have an influence on business economics. Now these environments are internal environments and external environment. So what are internal environments of? Internal environments of business means all those factors which business can control or influence. So all those factors which are very well within the reach of the decision maker, either to increase or reduce or to discard, are called as controllable factors or internal business environment. And all those factors that cannot be controlled or rather influenced by the business itself is what is called external business environment. Let's understand through examples. Suppose you have to increase the productivity in your factory, so you can have more raw material, you can deploy more labor, you can have a state of art of technology or machinery installed, you can increase your logistics support, right? Now, these are the factors for which you are not dependent on anyone else as a producer, rather it is very well within your reach. You can either increase it or reduce it. We call such factors as internal environmental factors. Now, what are external environmental factors? The external environmental factors are the factors on which business does not have any control. Rather, they have to adapt with external factors. Okay, for example, government policy, your 1957 Companies Act in 2017, all of a sudden it became, 2013 Company Act. This has been imposed by the business? No, it was imposed by the external factor, by the government agency. So now if you have to produce, you have to abide by the new law, isn't it? Suppose there has been shift in the global environment. Just few months, 6 months, 7 months back, we had a very cordial relationship with Canada. Now, due to the recent, controversy that has erupted up, all of a sudden, the visas has been suspended by our authorities. Now, it is something which has happened externally. Those business people who have a stake in India and want to have some meeting or some joint venture or some tie-up with Indian partners, they then now cannot reach to India, right? Can they control this environment? And it will impact their business. It will impact their opportunity. It will impact their revenue. So is it something which has happened because of their influence area? No, it has happened because of some regulation that has been imposed by the government of India, right? For which they do not have any control or any influence. Now sitting in Canada, they can't influence. Now, please relieve us, give us visa. We have business stakes. Policy, regulation that has been imposed, right? All of a sudden, suppose till now I was only one producer, one seller in the market. All of a sudden, 3 more new companies enters in the market. Now, if they enters in the market, we will have more competition. They will take my share only, which is causing problem to my business. But I do not have any control. Can I ask them, you don't come into this market, you don't eat my share? No, we can't ask them. They are our competitors. Now, these are another factor which may have the adverse impact in our business. However, this is not happening because of our control, our influence, but it is happening because of the factors which are not in our control. So these factors are another example of external environment. Okay, so the sum set of all these internal environmental factors or external environmental factors that affect the efficiency, that affect the operation, that affect the entire economics of business is what is called business environment. Now let's understand the various tools which help us to analyze various business environments. There are typically 4 tools which help us to understand the business environment. The first one, PESTLE. I'll explain you each one by one. The second one is SWOT analysis. The third one, WCAFU. I'll explain you each of this one by one. And the last one is Porter's 5-factor of business analysis. The SWOT and Porter's 5-factor of business analysis in your inter-class also in strategic management. Whenever you will have class, they'll explain you in detail. But just to give you a preamble of both, not in detail, SWOT analysis is a tool by which, at a nutshell, at a glance, we try to evaluate both internal as well as external factors. So we try to list up all those internal factors like employees, like machines, like products and services, like goodwills, you know, like infrastructure, like logistic partners, like financial situation. Now, these are the internal factors which are very well under the influence of business itself. So if these factors are giving us advantage, they become our strength. And if these factors are not giving us disadvantage, then it becomes weakness. So if employees are giving more production, then employees become our strength. If we have good financial condition, then finance becomes our strength, and so on. And if we have poor finance condition, then this same finance becomes our weakness. If employees are not skilled enough, they becomes our weakness. So strength and weakness are internal factors, always internal factors. Strength are those internal factors which are helpful, which gives us an advantage, and weakness are those internal factors which always gives us disadvantage. Let's try to know what is opportunity and threat. Opportunity and threat are external environmental factors like government, right? The government at dispensation, what is their policy, what is their ideology? They may also impact us, because as per their ideology, as per their policy, only they will formulate policies, law, regulation and all. So they have favorable or unfavorable environment. The second external factor would be the competition. The third external factor would be the GDP or employment state of the consumer. Though we are reducing the price of our commodity, but people do not have income in the market. So even at the reduced price, they are not going to consume our commodity. Why it is happening? Is it happening because we have not reduced the price, which was very well in our control area? No, it is happening because the income, which is not income of the population, income of the consumer is not in our hand, and that has declined. So it may adversely impact us. If it increases, even if we increase the price, it is giving us more margin, right? So all these external factors which are favorable are opportunity, and all these external factors which are not favorable are called threat. So for time being, you should just understand what is this SWOT analysis and how it helps. At a glance, this tool helps us to understand both internal factors, what are our internal factors, favorable one and unfavorable one, and what are the external factors which are favorable or unfavorable, and accordingly we take economical decisions. Analyzing all these internal and external factors, we take a cautious economical decision that what to produce, at what price it has to be sold, in what quantity it has to be supplied. All those economical decisions we take considering the SWOT analysis. Very important for all economists, for all policymakers, as a student of economics, to do proper SWOT analysis before actually taking any of this production related decisions or any of the strategy within the company. And as a cost accountant, you must do this. Now, very quickly, let's also understand Porter's 5-factor analysis. This analysis actually explains us the situation of competitors at any given point in time in a market, and the market forces at any given point of time, so that we take a cautious call, we take a proper economical decisions or business decisions. Now, what are these factors? These factors on competitor ends, there are 3 factors. And on market forces, there are two factors. So we analyze all these factors before taking the decision. What are these five factors on competitors? And as I told you, three competitor factors. Number one, what activity and what is the SWOT of the competitor who is direct competitor for me? Me too's. That means suppose you are manufacturer of a pen, say Jotter pen, and there are other manufacturers who also manufacture same set of pens. So these manufacturer becomes our direct competitors or me too's. So what is their strength? What is their weakness? What are marketing campaigns they are doing it? That all those analysis we do under this me too competitors. Second type of competitor factor is future entrants. Now, last year, if you recollect, government has announced 60,000 of subsidy, you know, in drone sectors for agriculture. Now, because of this, in drone sector, new manufacturers will come. So there will be more increase in the producers in the market. This will also have an impact in our business. So we consider in the second competitive factor all the possible threats that are coming from the new entrants in the market. Uh, And the third factor would be the threats which is competing from the relative goods. That means especially from the substitutes or complementary goods. So all those competitors who are actually not producing same type of commodity, but are producing a commodity that may be a substitute commodity for our product, or that may be a complementary commodity for our product. They also impose a certain advantage or disadvantage. So we also analyze this third type of competitors. So on competitors end, a proper analysis of all these three competitors has to be done. Direct competitors, new entrants, and the relative competitors. On market forces, we have two factors that we try to analyze. The one is demand schedule and the second one is supply schedule. So we try to understand what would be the total demand at any given point of time in the market, and accordingly we take the economical decision. And the second factor on market forces, we try to understand
Sir, you are not audible. Sir, you complete the session? You are not audible, sir. Hello. Sir, your voice is not clear.
Now, is it clear now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Tell me.
Okay, so I was on the last slide. I was just explaining you all people PESTEL. PESTEL means it's an abbreviation that explains us political. P stands for political, E stands for economical, S stands for social factors, T stands for technological factors, uh, E stands for environmental factors, and L stands for legal factors. So as an economist, as a decision maker, we also in a business have to analyze all these important factors before taking any call. Political factors means you need to understand the ideology of the political party that is in the government at the given point of time, because this explains us what type of regulation, what type of policy they are going to make, and accordingly we can make the adjustment in all our business activities. The second one is economical factors. Now, what is the rate of employment at any given point of time in the geography in which you are doing business, right? What is the nature of labor supply in the geography in which we are doing the business? Now, what is the status of consumer surplus, the consumer income, which will help us to understand how much can we supply, what demand can be created. So what is the inflation rate? So whether the inflation rate is increasing or decreasing, that will help us to take, pricing related decision. So this economical factors and its analysis is also important to take a cautious call, to take appropriate decision in taking the economical decision within the business. Now let's come to the social factor. Now social factor also imposes very important impact on our business operation, and therefore it is important for us to analyze even the social factor when we are trying to know about the business environment. What are these social factors? If you recollect, couple of months back, I think last year, Tanishq has floated an advertisement on social media. All of a sudden, what happened? There was a black backlash and lot of Twitter float. It started, trolling down it. And subsequently, what had happened? They could able to understand that they may impact the sale of their commodity and they withdraw that campaign. So this is called why social factor is important. While promoting your product or services, or by selling your product and services, you need to understand the social cultural belief system of the consumer. Suppose you try to give goods and services which is non-vegetarian in nature in a state which is 100% vegetarian, maybe Uttarakhand. Now what will happen? Your goods and services will not have any consumer. Why? Because your goods and services are not in line to the social belief of the consumers. So analyzing this social factor is also important. Then we comes to the technological factor. Uh, what is the prevailing technology that is there around us is also important while taking any business related decision. For example, uh, you see the fate of Nokia. Nokia was an excellent brand, number one brand, but new technology came in the mobile operating system, Android, and they were reluctant. They were not ready to change their operating system. As a result, what happened? Good quality product. Wonderful product with a great brand equity, with a wonderful share. It vanished away from the market. Why? They could not able to understand. They could not able to analyze the technological environment under which the consumer is living today, and hence they could not able to give them products, the services which is in line to their technological harmony. So this technological factor also plays a very important role in the business, and therefore as a student of economics, we need to analyze thoroughly the technological environment. The next comes environmental consideration. Nowadays, all countries are more focused towards greener earth. They are talking about saving the planet Earth. So energy consumption, ozone layer depletion, all this because of industry waste. So how you are producing your goods and commodity? If you recollect, couple of months back, a recent provision of carbon crediting came for all the producers. So if your production activity is more energy efficient, you get a certain carbon credit which you can utilize in future production. And if it is not nature friendly, then you are even penalized for this. In certain countries, there is a heavy penalty imposed. Maybe in our country also we will face such imposition. There are various a time you see we do not get, the producers do not get environmental clearance because their production activity may cause threat to the geography, to the territory, to the nature itself, to land itself. So as a economist, we also need to take in consideration all this environmental factor before taking any business related decision or before helping the business for all their economical decision. And the last factor that we should know is the legal factor. Now, what is legal factor? Legal factor means what are the prescribed laws of the country, of the geography in which we are taking business. So we have to see that all our economical activities are in line to the compliance of the law. If they are not in line to the compliance of the law, even the best of the idea, we won't able to materialize it. So before taking economical decision, we need to make sure that the process is in line to the legal compliance. It is not violating any of the prevailing law, prescribed law of the land, right? So this all analysis, political, economical, social, technical, environmental and legal analysis is important aspect of business environment. And as an economical decision maker, you must analyze all this business environmental factor first, then only you should take economical decisions. OK, the last one, the last tool is VUCAFU. Now the full form of VUCAFU is V stands for volatility, U stands for uncertainty, C stands for complexity, A stands for ambiguity, and FU stands for fear of unknown and unprecedented. Now, you say now the entire market is very complex. It's very volatile. So we must be aware about what volatility we may face in our business in near terms or in future. We must be aware about uncertainty. All of a sudden, COVID happened. No one was expecting. So since we had the technology, we adapted to the digital platform and we could able to survive. But if this understanding will not prevail about the uncertainty, the business will vanish away. So before taking all such business related decision, we also need to forecast, or we should be at least aware. We should be ready to adapt with all such uncertainty. Complexity. Now, everything is interrelated. The internet, the technology and the production. Now gone those days when you used to stand in the queue in the bank and then you used to do all the banking decisions, banking transaction. It is the time when you are sitting at the comfort of your home and you are doing all the transaction. Even at the roadside with street vendors, when you have the charts and fuchkas and all, you pay through UPI. So if anything happens, if internet disrupts, the entire business will disrupt. So now it is more complex business environment rather than the previous one where we had to just focus on certain areas and we used to leave rest others. Ambiguity, everything that we see has many different interpretations. So we also need to analyze what is hidden thing. What are the factors which we are unable to see? What may have a serious consequence or impact on our business? And the last one is the fear of unknown. So most of the time we have this fear कि क्या हो जाएगा, we don't know. So let it happen and we will adapt. OK, so as a strategy maker, as a decision maker, as an economist, we all should be aware about this business environment. So that we are ready and we are ready to adapt with any changes that may happen due to external forces. So I think with this, we have covered unit 1 and unit, I think 4, the business environmental part. 2 units we have covered in today's class. I've shared slides with you all people, so you can keep those slides as a ready reckoner. And please read your manual. These are manual study notes are very important. Very neatly it has been explained in your manual. The moment you will read all those chapters in your manual, you will recollect my class and you can relate the slides also. So that's all for today. Thank you very much. Now you may leave.
Yeah, hello sir, tell me.
हाँ जी सर, हो गया, मेरी तरफ से हो गया. Now
अच्छा
you
सर,
can
ठीक है.
end the call. कोई
ओके ओके
क्वेश्चन
सर.
अगर किसी बच्चों का तो पूछ लीजिए.
कोई क्वेश्चन आंसर सेशन तो वहीं से आप देख सकते हैं, फिर भी हम
Okay,
देख रहे हैं.
anyone, if you have any question.
आपको नजर आ रहा है सर वहां से?
आज इंटरनेट थोड़ा सा स्लो है, थोड़ी दिक्कत हो रही है.
हाँ 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 हाँ, सो है. नहीं नहीं, क्वेश्चन कोई नहीं है सर.
नहीं है?
नहीं है
ठीक है.
सर.
ठीक है, चलिए मेरे स्लाइड्स तो
क्वेश्चन
मैंने शेयर कर दिया है. अगर किसी को चाहिए तो आप बच्चों को दे सकते हैं, कोई दिक्कत नहीं.
जरूर सर, जरूर सर. थैंक यू सर.
चलिए, थैंक यू. आप कॉल एंड कर सकते हैं.
हाँ सर.